he thought Barack Obama, he wanted a primary. He said we should primary Barack Obama. Someone should. And in fact, the president was weak, and our administration was, in fact, not up to it.
Biden is referring to when Bernie Sanders was considering running against President Obama back in 2011, and Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid had to talk him out of it. But unless you read The Atlantic, you probably have no idea what the hell Biden is yelling about, nor does it have anything to do with 2020.
I will tell you, Pete, what the American people want, and Joe, what the American people want. They don't want candidates to be running to billionaires for huge amounts of funding.
All right, let's clear this up once and for all.
Pete has gotten funding
you've got people believing
from
something that is
50
false.
billionaires.
This
Joe, I
needs to be
think, has
cleared up.
gotten a little bit more.
This is one of the dumbest arguments that Bernie Sanders continues to yell about. Sanders has famously declared that he won't accept campaign contributions from billionaires. Then again, I don't see any billionaires banging down Sanders' door begging him to take their money. It's like bragging that you're not going to a party that you weren't invited to.
I can't allow this to stand because it's just not true. Senator Sanders has got people believing something that is untrue about my campaign. The idea that most of my campaign is funded by billionaires.
Say that, Pete.
But Bernie is implying it. And the truth is that just because a billionaire contributes to a campaign doesn't mean that they have more influence than a regular Joe Schmo who contributes the same amount.
And if you're watching right now and you're a billionaire, I will raise your taxes. But if you'd like to defeat Donald Trump, please go to PeteForAmerica.com and donate the legal maximum of $2,800.
And Mayor Pete's exactly right. The Federal Election Commission limits how much you can contribute to an individual political campaign. And consider that Buttigieg raised nearly $83 million through January 31st. So $140,000 from billionaires is a drop in the bucket. And speaking of billionaires,
All of the new Democrats that came in, put Nancy Pelosi in charge, and gave the Congress the ability to control this president, I got them.
oops,
I know what to do. I've shown I know how to run a country. I've run the city, which is almost the same size, as bigger than most countries in the world.
for the record, New York City is the largest city in the United States in terms of population. But if New York City was a country, it would rank 102nd out of 234 countries. So not much of a flex.
When I was 21 years old, I got my first job as a special education teacher. I loved that job. And by the end of the first year, I was visibly pregnant. The principal wished me luck and gave my job to someone else. Pregnancy discrimination, you bet.
Except in a 2007 interview with University of California Television, Warren said this.
It was in a public school system, but I worked with the children with disabilities. And I did that for a year. I actually didn't have the education courses, so I was on an emergency certificate, it was called. And I went back to graduate school and took a couple of courses in education and said, I don't think this is going to work out for me. And I was pregnant with my first baby. So I had a baby and stayed home for a couple of years.
So what Warren is saying is that education wasn't right for her and that she decided to stay home with her child. If anything, this pregnancy discrimination was self-inflicted. Furthermore, there's documentation discovered by the Washington Free Beacon that definitively shows that she was offered a second-year contract by the Riverdale Board of Education and that her resignation was accepted with regret. This is all pretty well known, but she insists on lying and saying that she was fired. And by telling the story, in this moment, it was a seg into attacking Bloomberg over his alleged mistreatment of women.
At least I didn't have a boss who said to me, kill it. The way that Mayor Bloomberg
Never
alleged
said
to
that.
have said to one of his
come on.
pregnant employees.
Oh, give me a break. It just shows that the mayor is pro-choice. Instead of attacking him, Warren should be applauding him. Besides, it's not like he was demanding that she actually do it, right? But seriously, it was probably a joke. A very bad joke for sure, but a joke nonetheless.
Did these women take your jokes wrong, or were you wrong to make the jokes?
Probably wrong to make the jokes. I don't remember what they were.
So if he doesn't remember what these bad jokes were, then maybe he did say what Warren is accusing him of saying.
Senator Warren, that is a very serious charge that you leveled at the mayor.
Yes.
Told a woman to get an abortion. What evidence do you have of that?
Her own words.
In other words, believe all women.
Senator Sanders, the cost of your agenda. Yesterday, you released information about how you will pay for your major proposals, but not all of your details are clear. You've proposed more than $50 trillion in new spending. You've said Medicare for all will
Over a
cost
10-year
$30
period.
trillion.
Unfortunately, you can give Bernie Sanders all the time in the world, and you would not be able to pay for Medicare for all, let alone a Green New Deal, free college, and canceling student debt. In a Word document provided by Sanders called Options to Finance Medicare for All, you'll find a slew of new taxes, fees, and rules. However, the revenue raised by these options comes to $12 trillion, far short of the $30 trillion needed to fund Medicare for all.
The math does not add up. In fact, just on 60 Minutes this weekend, he said he wasn't going to rattle through the nickels and the dimes. Well, let me tell you how many nickels and dimes we're talking about. Nearly $60 trillion. Do you know how much that is for all of his programs? That is 3 times the American economy, not the federal government, the entire American economy.
Here, when Klobuchar said that all of Bernie's programs would cost at least $60 trillion, he misheard her and thought that she was only referring to the cost of Medicare for all. And then Bernie ended up saying something very telling.
Ours will cost about $45 billion, not $60 trillion.
Whoa, if Medicare for all is only going to cost $45 billion, count me in. But unfortunately, he probably meant to say $45 trillion, even though he's been claiming that it's $30 trillion. I think he just let the cat out of the bag.
So let's talk about what
Let's
it adds
talk
up.
about math.
Let's talk about math.
Talk about
indeed.
math.
Okay,
If
so
we
here's
do
the math.
nothing,
No, here's the math. It adds up to 4 more years of Donald Trump, Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House, and the inability to get the Senate into Democratic hands.
And Mayor Pete is exactly right. If Sanders gets the Democratic nomination, Republican voters are going to come out in huge numbers. Not to mention that Bernie's going to have a hell of a time winning in Florida over his past and present comments praising Fidel Castro.
You may recall way back in, 1961, they invaded Cuba. And everybody was totally convinced that Castro was the worst guy in the world. All the Cuban people were going to rise up in rebellion against Fidel Castro. They forgot that he educated the kids, gave them health care, totally transformed the society.
When asked about this on 60 Minutes, he doubled down.
It's unfair to simply say everything is bad. When Fidel Castro came into office, you know what he did? He had a massive literacy program. Is that a bad thing?
Bernie was widely criticized for his remarks, and his defense was that he was repeating what Barack Obama said back in 2016.
The United States recognizes progress that Cuba has made as a nation. Its enormous achievements in education and in healthcare.
What I said is what Barack Obama said in terms of Cuba. That Cuba made progress on education. Yes, I think. Really?
Yes, because
Literacy
there's no
programs
comparing
are bad.
those two
What
comments.
Barack Obama
Barack
said
Obama
is
was
they
doing
made
so because
great progress on
What you were
education
doing is making
and
excuses.
healthcare. That was Barack Obama.
And that's all true, but the issue is that Bernie Sanders is no Barack Obama.
We have a criminal justice system today that is not only broken, it is racist, got more people in jail than any other country on earth, including China. One of the reasons for that is a horrific war on drugs. What we are also going to do is move to expunge the records of those people who were arrested for possession of marijuana.
Bernie Sanders is exaggerating the impact of drug possession sentences on so-called mass incarceration. According to the United States Sentencing Commission, in 2017, simple marijuana possession accounted for 0.46% of all drug-related federal cases. And not everyone sentenced for drug possession gets prison time. In fiscal year 2018, of 777 drug possession sentences, 62% received imprisonment, 25% received probation, and 13% received only a fine. I should also point out that 48.4% of all drug possession offenders were non-U.S. citizens.
And I'll tell you what else we're going to do. We're going to provide help to the African American, Latino, Native American community to start businesses to sell legal marijuana rather than let a few corporations control the legalized marijuana market.
Man, I don't know. I mean, what happens if all those minority-owned businesses become hugely successful and become giant corporations themselves? I mean, don't we have enough millionaires and billionaires, Bernie? And finally, former Vice President Joe Biden has this to say regarding Bernie Sanders' record on gun legislation.
150 million people have been killed since 2007 when Bernie voted to exempt the gun manufacturers from liability. More than all the wars, including Vietnam, from that point on.
That is a shocking claim, which would mean that nearly half of the United States population has been wiped out by gun violence just in the last 13 years, but needless to say, he's wrong. But what's really troubling is that the moderators or the other candidates neglected to correct him. Then again, they might.
Yeah, Ma. Hold on one sec.